In this section, we are going to define what the ego state is, since if you want to learn to control it, and for it not to control you through its psychic forces, it is necessary that you be able to differentiate it from other components of who you are. As I told you in the introduction, the self is not the soul and it is not the spirit either. The soul is going to be your essence, that which defines you, that part of your being that never changes, that remains unchanged. I don't want to go into detail here, but the soul was studied by the Greeks, and they always looked for that which remained constant. That was the way in which they defined their gods. For example, Aphrodite is the goddess of beauty because she is an essential quality. In reality, there are beautiful things and ugly things. Beauty is something that can be observed. The same thing happens with Athena. Wisdom, intelligence are qualities that one can observe and that have existed since the beginning of time. When doing a soul study, what we do is precisely look for those qualities of yours that are essentials, that do not change. But I insist, here we are not going to get into that topic. The spirit, on the other hand, is the part of your being that enters into direct relationship with God. There are people who suffer or enter states of depression and loss of meaning in life precisely because their spirit has been diminished due to the traumatic experiences they have suffered throughout their lives. Remember that the spirit is defined as the breath of God in your soul. It is what gives life to your soul and what begins the process in which you begin to build yourself. Once these distinctions have been made, let's move on to define the state of the self, which, as you will discover throughout this module, is made up of several elements and is always changing. Precisely because, in order for you to overcome the difficulties and challenges that your life experience subjects you to, you need a psychic component that is flexible, like yourself. Think about what would happen to you in the interaction you have in your reality if yourself did not change, as happens with your soul. You would be in a situation where you need to transform yourself, but your essence would prevent you from doing so. In fact, as you will discover in this section, many of the problems that arise in people who experience a neurosis, whether through depression or a loss of meaning in life, have to do, on the one hand, with not being able to flex their self state, and on the other hand, with not being able to live and accept that self state that defines them. Deep down, when you cannot be who you are and you get frustrated because of it, because others force you to be someone else, that's when the neurosis processes that I just told you about arise. Given this frame of reference, let's move on to define what the self state is. As a first point, let's establish that your self state is the perception of your individuality, about what makes you different from others. You are because you exist, and you know that you exist because in some space in your psyche, you know that you are not the same as others, that you have qualities and desires that are only yours. If you notice, the freedom of yourself is always associated with having the possibility of doing what you want in life and not what others imposed on you. Now, this self is made up of different elements. On the one hand, we have your nuclear self, which is what defines you and what you want to do. A topic that we are going to work on in the section where I am going to teach you how to recognize the forces that operate in your nuclear self-state, which is unique, and to control it. Think of your core self-state as a center whose main function is to control a series of forces in your psyche that are always trying to take over yourself. We are going to work on the recognition and control of these psychic forces in the corresponding sections. The important thing is that here you can see that your self-state is surrounded by repressive and compulsive forces, which lead you to act on autopilot and carry out actions either to obtain the satisfaction of some type of desire or to avoid exposing yourself to some kind of danger. Above these repressive and compulsive forces, which are next to your core self-state, you will find the internal self-states, which are manifestations of your self-state, which have been created precisely so that you can deal with different environments or people with the ones you interact within your day-to-day life. That's why I told you that the self-state is flexible. So here you are going to find that there is your happy self-state, your child self-state, your bitter self-state, to give you just a few examples. We are going to delve deeper into these topics. And about those inner self-states, you will encounter your archetypical self-states, which are those forces that are found in all human beings, which have emerged as a product of the experiences that humanity has had as a whole. They form part of the collective unconscious. An example would be the parent self-state. We all have a father within us who makes us do things that are positive or negative for our lives, depending on the relationship we have had with our father in our childhood. Another example would be the mother's self-state. That mother that you carry inside you and that leads you to make decisions based on the positive or negative perception you have of yourself, depending on whether or not your mother gave you the love and security that you needed in your childhood. If you look, all of these forces are what are operating in your self-state, which can be reinforced or limited depending on the ability you have to control it, which is what we are going to be doing in the following sections. Here, you have learned what differentiates your self-state from other components of your being, such as your soul and your spirit, and what the main elements make up your self-state, such as your core self-state, your internal self-state, and your archetypical self-states. Now you know why it is so difficult to change a person, precisely because for someone to change, for them to do what we want, or for ourselves to change, we need to operate on all these psychic components. We are going to work on all these in the following sections, and that will be precisely what will allow you to learn to control your self-state, and with this, the most important thing about this program. You will discover and transform into who you really want to be, with which you will get your freedom. I'll see you in the next sections.